It was just another Monday morning at Willow Creek Middle School, and the hallways were buzzing with the usual chatter. Students were exchanging weekend stories, some laughing loudly, while others hurried to their first class. Among them walked a boy who usually went unnoticed. He was quiet, always keeping to himself, and his small backpack seemed almost too big for his frame. His name wasn't important to the story yet. What mattered was that he had a secret. He had a gift, one that very few people knew about, and even he hadn't shown it openly at school. Music was his world, a place where he felt calm and strong at the same time. The principal of Willow Creek, on the other hand, was known for being a character of his own. He had a booming voice that could fill the auditorium and a laugh that was both intimidating and mischievous. He liked to think he was funny, often making jokes that weren't always in good taste. Some students adored him while others were cautious around him. He had a reputation for putting students on the spot, testing them in ways that made them squirm. Today, however, he had something different in mind, something that would turn the ordinary Monday into a story that nobody would forget. The assembly began like any other. Students filed into the auditorium, taking their seats in neat rows. The principal stood at the front, smiling as he looked over the crowd. He started talking about the school's achievements, the sports victories, and the upcoming events. Everything seemed normal until he paused and scanned the audience, his eyes finally resting on the boy who had always stayed quiet. A grin spread across the principal's face, and he pointed directly at the boy. "You there," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. "Come up here and play the piano for us." The boy froze. All the noise in the auditorium seemed to fade for a moment. He hadn't been expecting this. His heart started beating faster, and his mind raced with questions. Why him? What was this about? The students around him began whispering and nudging each other. Some were curious, some were amused, and a few were already smirking, sensing that the principal might be up to one of his pranks. The boy stood slowly, his legs trembling slightly. He walked toward the front, each step feeling heavier than the last. As he approached the piano, the principal leaned forward with a playful smile. "Don't worry, it's just for fun," he said. The boy couldn't tell if the principal was being kind or mocking him. The students in the auditorium were now leaning forward in their seats, their eyes fixed on him. Some held their phones, ready to capture what they thought would be a funny moment. Sitting down at the piano, the boy placed his hands on the keys. He closed his eyes briefly, taking a deep breath. Inside he was nervous, but there was also a spark of something else. Hope, maybe. He had practiced piano for years in his room, away from the eyes of classmates and teachers. Music had always been his refuge, a place where he could be himself without fear of judgment. But this was different. Now all eyes were on him, and he wasn't sure if he could live up to the moment. The principal clapped his hands and said, "Go ahead. Let's see what you've got." There was a hint of mischief in his tone, as if he expected the boy to fumble or play something awkward. Some students giggled quietly, waiting for the entertainment. The boy's fingers hovered over the keys, hesitant. Then he remembered why he loved music in the first place. He remembered the hours he spent practicing, the songs he had mastered, and the way the piano had always made him feel strong. He pressed the first key, a soft note that seemed to echo in the quiet auditorium. It was simple, but it was real. The second note followed, and then the third, each one more confident than the last. Slowly, the boy began to play a melody that he had composed himself, one that flowed naturally from his fingers. The sound filled the room, surprising everyone, including himself. For a moment, the principal's playful grin faltered. This wasn't going the way he expected. The students were silent now, not out of fear but out of amazement. Whispers of disbelief spread like wildfire. "Is he really playing that well?" one student murmured. Another shook their head, unable to believe what they were hearing. The melody was beautiful, full of emotion and skill. It was clear that the boy had talent far beyond what anyone had imagined. As the music continued, the boy started to lose some of his nervousness. He was no longer playing for the principal or the audience. He was playing for himself, and the notes seemed to carry his feelings across the auditorium. The principal watched, momentarily speechless, as the boy's talent unfolded before everyone. What was supposed to be a joke was turning into something extraordinary. Some students pulled out their phones, capturing the performance. Others simply sat there, unable to look away. Teachers who had attended the assembly were exchanging glances, impressed by the boy's unexpected skill. Even the principal, who had intended this to be a moment of humor at the boy's expense, found himself captivated. There was no mocking here, no laughter, only admiration and awe. The boy's hands moved gracefully over the keys, each note carefully chosen. The music told a story that the boy had never shared with anyone at school. It was a story of quiet perseverance, of dedication, of hidden talent waiting for the right moment to shine. And now, in this very auditorium, that moment had arrived. By the time the last note lingered and faded into silence, the entire room seemed to be holding its breath. Then, slowly, the applause began. At first, it was tentative, unsure, but it grew louder and louder, until the auditorium was filled with clapping and cheering. The boy looked up, surprised by the reaction. He hadn't expected such a response, but a smile crept onto his face. For the first time in front of his peers, he felt seen and appreciated. The principal finally spoke, his voice calmer now, without the usual edge of humor. "Well," he said, "I did not see that coming. That was incredible." The students cheered again, some shouting the boy's name, even though he usually remained in the background. The boy stood, bowing slightly, feeling a mixture of pride and relief. He had turned what could have been an embarrassing moment into a triumph. As the assembly ended and students filed out of the auditorium, there was a new sense of respect for the boy. He had shown courage, skill, and the power of staying true to oneself, even when others expected you to fail. The principal, now a little humbled, knew that this was a lesson he would not forget. What had started as a prank had revealed something far greater than anyone could have imagined. A hidden talent, a young boy's courage, and a reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary things come from the most unexpected places. After the assembly, the boy returned to his classroom feeling a mix of excitement and nervous energy. His friends, who had never really seen him as more than quiet and reserved, stared at him with wide eyes. They couldn't stop talking about what had just happened. Some of them were genuinely amazed. Others were still processing that someone they barely noticed could play so beautifully. The boy felt a strange sense of pride, but also a little awkward. He had always loved music for himself, and now everyone knew his secret. The principal, meanwhile, went back to his office, still thinking about the moment. He had intended the prank to be lighthearted, something to stir a few laughs at the boy's expense. But instead, he had witnessed talent that was undeniable. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. He realized he had misjudged the boy completely. What had started as a joke had turned into a lesson he wouldn't forget. Word about the boy's piano performance spread quickly through the school. By lunchtime, students who hadn't even attended the assembly were talking about it in the cafeteria. Some approached him with genuine admiration, asking how long he had been playing. The boy shrugged, feeling shy but happy that people were noticing him for something real. He still couldn't believe how quickly his private world had become public. As the days passed, the boy found himself being invited to play at school events. Teachers started suggesting that he participate in music competitions, and the principal himself even approached him with an offer to perform at the next school assembly. The boy felt a mixture of excitement and pressure. He had always loved music, but now it felt like a responsibility. He had to prove that what happened in the assembly wasn't just luck. It was skill and passion. The principal, who had once seen him as just another student, now regarded him with a mix of respect and curiosity. He began to think about how often students' talents went unnoticed because adults didn't take the time to see beyond the surface. He realized that he had a role in encouraging students, not just entertaining them or testing them for a laugh. This was a lesson that hit him harder than any reprimand or meeting ever could. The boy's confidence began to grow. At first, he had been nervous to show his talent, worried that people would judge him or laugh at mistakes. But the applause and praise he received made him feel accepted and valued. He started to practice more openly, even showing small pieces to classmates who were interested. It was a new experience for him, sharing something so personal and seeing others appreciate it. Despite the newfound attention, there were still moments of doubt. Sometimes, when walking through crowded hallways or sitting in class, he worried that the admiration wouldn't last. What if people realized that he wasn't as skilled as they thought? What if it had all been a one-time fluke? These thoughts weighed on him, but he also knew that the only way to silence them was through dedication and practice. Music had always been his safe space, and now he understood that it could also be his voice. Teachers who had noticed his talent began to encourage him in subtle ways. One music teacher offered extra lessons after school, while another suggested he compose a piece for the school concert. The boy was hesitant at first, unsure if he was ready, but the support from the adults around him helped him take small steps forward. Each note he played outside of the assembly became a statement, not just of skill, but of courage and self-expression. The principal, who had been observing quietly, decided to take another step. He called a meeting with the boy and his parents, expressing genuine admiration and offering opportunities for growth. He suggested that the boy could even help lead a music club at school or mentor younger students who were learning instruments. It was a complete turnaround from the prank that had started it all. What had been meant as a moment of embarrassment had now become the beginning of a journey that could shape the boy's future. Meanwhile, students continued to react in different ways. Some were inspired by his talent, seeing that anyone could have hidden skills. Others were motivated to explore their own interests, realizing that school was more than just tests and assignments. It was a place to discover passions. The boy had unintentionally become a role model, showing that quiet determination and dedication could lead to surprising and wonderful outcomes. As the weeks went by, the boy began to see music as more than just a personal hobby. It became a way to connect with others, a way to communicate emotions and ideas that words could not capture. He started to perform small pieces in class, at lunch, and during school gatherings. Each time he felt more confident, more at home in his own skin. The music that had once been private was now shared openly, and the reactions of his peers and teachers reinforced that he had something special to offer. Even the principal, who had once treated the moment as a prank, began to reflect on his own behavior. He realized that teasing students, even with good intentions, could have consequences. Sometimes a joke could accidentally expose hidden talent, and other times it could hurt confidence. He vowed to be more thoughtful in the future, to find ways to encourage students rather than set them up for embarrassment. The boy's performance had taught him humility, and he couldn't forget the feeling of surprise and awe that had filled the auditorium. The boy's story continued to unfold quietly but powerfully. With each day, he learned to balance his love for music with the attention it brought. He practiced diligently, not for recognition, but for the joy it gave him. His talent was no longer a secret, but it remained a deeply personal part of who he was. He began to understand that sharing his gift could inspire others, and that his voice, through music, could reach places words sometimes could not. By the end of the month, the boy had transformed in ways that went beyond the piano. He walked with more confidence, spoke up more in class, and formed stronger connections with his peers. The principal and teachers continued to support him, creating opportunities for him to grow and shine. And while the story of the prank would be remembered and retold by students for months to come, what truly mattered was the boy's courage, the unveiling of his talent, and the positive changes that followed. In the hallways, the whispers and laughter had shifted. Now, when students saw him, there was a sense of admiration and respect. People had witnessed something rare and beautiful, and it had changed the way they saw him, and perhaps even the way they saw themselves. The boy's journey was just beginning, and while the prank had started it all, the real story was about discovery, courage, and the quiet power of hidden talent. A few days after the assembly, the boy found himself invited to the music room during lunch. He had never spent much time there because he preferred practicing alone in his room at home, where no one could watch him or judge him. But now, the principal and a few teachers wanted to give him a chance to explore his talent in a more formal way. They had set up a small, quiet space with a grand piano that gleamed under the afternoon light. The boy's fingers tingled just thinking about it, but there was also a quiet nervousness. This was different from the assembly. Here, there was no audience of hundreds, but there was still expectation, and expectations could feel heavy. As he sat down, the music teacher who had been quietly observing his talent smiled and said, "You don't have to worry. Just play what feels right." The boy nodded, feeling the encouragement but also sensing the responsibility. Every note mattered, and he wanted to honor the trust they were placing in him. He pressed the first keys gently, and the familiar sound filled the room. He closed his eyes, letting the music flow naturally. Unlike the assembly, this time there were no pranks, no smirks, no whispers of doubt. Just him and the piano. As he played, the music teacher listened carefully. Occasionally, she would offer small suggestions about technique or timing, but mostly she let the boy explore his own style. The boy's confidence grew with each note. The melody became more complex, more expressive, and he could feel the room responding to him. Even though no one applauded yet, the teacher's attentive eyes made him feel seen in a way that was comforting and inspiring. For the first time, he realized that music was not just a personal escape, but also a way to communicate and connect with others. Meanwhile, the principal, who had been watching from the doorway, could hardly believe what he was hearing. The boy's talent had grown since the assembly, and there was a depth to his playing that was unexpected. The principal's mind raced. He thought about the prank he had planned, how it had completely backfired in the best possible way. The boy wasn't embarrassed at all. He had turned what was meant to be a joke into something extraordinary, and now he was proving that his skill was real and powerful. The boy's friends, who had heard about this special session, were allowed to peek in quietly. They watched in awe as their normally quiet classmate filled the room with music that seemed to carry emotions they couldn't put into words. They whispered among themselves, amazed at how much they had underestimated him. Some even pulled out their phones discreetly, wanting to capture a moment that felt special. Unlike the assembly, this was intimate and personal, and they felt lucky to witness it. As the boy continued to play, the music teacher encouraged him to try a piece he had composed himself. At first, he hesitated, worried that it might not be perfect. But she reassured him, saying, "Music isn't about perfection. It's about expression. Let the piano speak for you." That simple advice changed everything. The boy started to play a melody he had written in secret, a piece full of feeling and stories he had never shared. The notes were soft, sometimes hesitant, sometimes bold, but they carried his personality and heart. As he played, he felt a sense of freedom, as if he could finally share a part of himself that had been hidden away for so long. The principal watched silently, feeling a mix of pride and humility. He realized that talent could be hidden in the most unlikely students and that teasing or underestimating someone could easily obscure the greatness within. This boy had shown courage, dedication, and creativity, and he had done so without any expectation of reward or recognition. It was a reminder to the principal that true talent and passion often went unnoticed until given a chance to shine. After the session, the music teacher suggested that the boy start performing for smaller groups at school, to gradually get used to an audience. The boy agreed, though he felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. Performing for a few students was different from the assembly, but it felt like a safe way to grow. Over the next few weeks, he began playing during lunch breaks for interested classmates. The reactions were consistently positive, and his confidence grew steadily. He realized that sharing his gift brought joy not only to himself but also to those around him. Word about the boy's talent continued to spread. More students wanted to listen, and teachers started recommending him for school events. The principal even approached him privately, apologizing for treating him as a joke initially and encouraging him to keep exploring his abilities. The boy appreciated the support but didn't want to let the attention change his love for music. He wanted to play because it felt right, not because others were watching. As he practiced more, the boy began experimenting with different styles of music. He combined classical techniques with melodies he had imagined himself, creating unique pieces that reflected his personality. Each new composition brought a sense of accomplishment and pride. He started keeping a journal of his ideas and musical experiments, documenting the progress he was making. Music was becoming more than a talent. It was becoming a path to self-discovery and personal growth. One day, during a small performance for his classmates, the boy noticed the principal quietly sitting in the back, listening intently. The principal's eyes showed genuine admiration and perhaps a hint of regret for underestimating him. After the performance, the principal walked up and said, "I think you have something very special. Keep going, and don't let anyone make you doubt it." The boy nodded, feeling proud but also grounded. He realized that praise was meaningful, but the true satisfaction came from the music itself. The boy also began to form stronger connections with his peers. Students who had previously ignored him now sought him out, not just for his talent, but also for his perspective and ideas. He became a quiet source of inspiration, showing that dedication, courage, and passion could create change and earn respect. Through music, he found a way to connect, communicate, and leave an impact on those around him. Meanwhile, the principal reflected on the lessons he had learned. He thought about how often students' talents were overlooked, how easy it was to make assumptions based on appearances or behavior. He realized that a simple joke could have serious consequences, both positive and negative. In this case, the prank had led to discovery and growth, but he knew he needed to be more careful and thoughtful in the future. The boy's talent had humbled him and reminded him of the importance of recognizing and nurturing potential in every student. As the weeks continued, the boy's confidence and skill grew steadily. He started preparing for the next school assembly, this time with the opportunity to perform intentionally, not as a result of a prank. He felt ready, more in control, and eager to share his music in a meaningful way. He practiced diligently, refining his compositions and experimenting with new ideas. Each practice session built not only his skill but also his sense of self-assurance and purpose. By the time the next performance approached, the boy was transformed. He was no longer the quiet student who went unnoticed in the hallways. He had become a musician, a performer, and a source of inspiration for his peers. The principal, teachers, and students all knew that he was someone extraordinary, someone whose talent deserved recognition and respect. The prank that had started it all seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a story of courage, growth, and the discovery of hidden brilliance. In these days, the boy learned an important lesson. True talent is not just about skill. It is about courage, practice, and the willingness to share what makes you unique. He realized that every note he played was a way to tell a story, to communicate emotions, and to inspire others. The journey that began with a prank had transformed into a path of discovery and self-expression, one that would continue to shape his life and influence those around him in ways he had never imagined. The day of the small school assembly arrived, and the boy felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. This time, he wasn't being called up as part of a prank. This was his chance to perform intentionally, to show his talent in a way that was meaningful to him. The auditorium was filled with students, teachers, and even some parents who had been invited to witness his performance. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, but this time, there was no smirk from the principal, no expectation of a joke. Everyone was curious and eager to see the boy play. As he walked to the piano, the boy took a deep breath. He could feel the weight of all eyes on him, but it didn't feel heavy. It felt important, like this was the moment he had been preparing for in his quiet hours of practice. He remembered the advice of his music teacher. Music was about expression, not perfection. He let that thought settle in, allowing his nerves to soften into focus. The principal nodded encouragingly, a subtle gesture that showed respect and pride rather than mischief. The boy sat down, and his fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, feeling the familiar texture and weight beneath them. He pressed the first note, soft and deliberate. It echoed through the auditorium, drawing attention and curiosity. Then the second note followed, and then the third, each one growing more confident and expressive. As the boy continued to play, the melody began to fill the room with emotion. It was clear that this was not just a simple performance. It was a story being told through music. Each note seemed to carry his experiences, his dedication, and his love for the piano. Students and teachers alike were captivated. Some had their eyes closed, listening intently, as if trying to feel every note as it resonated. Others sat forward, unable to look away, mesmerized by the depth of skill and emotion. The principal, who had seen the prank unfold weeks ago, was now fully absorbed in the music. He felt a wave of humility and admiration. He realized that he had underestimated the boy and that this performance was proof of how hidden talent could flourish when given encouragement and opportunity. The lesson was clear. Never assume a student's potential, and always provide space for growth and discovery. The boy's fingers moved gracefully across the keys, each note deliberate, each chord resonant. He was no longer playing for approval or attention. He was playing to express himself, to share a part of his heart with everyone in the room. The melody was intricate, full of rising and falling emotions, capturing moments of hope, struggle, and triumph. The audience was silent, enraptured, as if the music had cast a spell over them. A few students whispered to each other, amazed at how someone they had barely noticed could play so beautifully. Some were inspired to practice their own instruments or pursue their own interests with more dedication. Teachers exchanged impressed glances, realizing that nurturing hidden talents was as important as teaching academics. The principal sat back, reflecting on the impact of a single moment of courage and the responsibility adults have to recognize and support students' abilities. Halfway through the performance, the boy introduced a section he had composed himself. It was personal and expressive, a piece that told his own story in a way that words never could. The composition flowed naturally, each note carefully chosen to convey emotion and thought. The audience was deeply affected, some holding back tears, others feeling a sense of awe at the beauty and skill of the music. It was clear that this boy had something special, something that transcended ordinary talent. As the final notes lingered and faded into silence, the room remained still for a moment. Then, slowly, the applause began, at first tentative, then growing louder, until the auditorium was filled with clapping and cheering. The boy looked up, surprised and grateful. He had shared his gift, and it had been received with admiration and respect. The moment felt transformative, not just for him, but for everyone in the room. The principal stood and clapped, a proud smile on his face. He approached the boy after the performance and said quietly, "That was incredible. I'm sorry I ever thought of you as part of a joke. You've shown everyone your talent, your courage, and your heart. Keep playing, and never doubt yourself." The boy nodded, feeling a warmth of validation and encouragement that went beyond words. It was a turning point, a moment that would stay with him forever. Teachers and parents came forward to congratulate the boy. They praised his dedication, creativity, and the emotion he poured into his music. Students surrounded him, eager to express their admiration and ask questions about how he learned and practiced. For the first time, the boy felt fully recognized, not just for a single performance, but for the hard work, passion, and perseverance that had led him to this moment. Over the next few days, the boy's performance continued to be a topic of conversation. Students shared videos and talked excitedly about the music. Teachers used the performance as an example of how encouragement and opportunity could unlock potential. The principal reflected on the experience, realizing that the prank he had planned had inadvertently uncovered something extraordinary. He had learned a lesson about humility, the importance of seeing students' strengths, and the transformative power of talent when nurtured and respected. The boy, meanwhile, continued to practice and compose new pieces. He began preparing for more formal performances, not because he wanted recognition, but because he had discovered a new confidence and joy in sharing his music. His love for the piano had grown deeper, and he understood that his talent could impact and inspire others. He played for friends, teachers, and small gatherings, gradually building a sense of community through his music. He also began mentoring younger students who were learning instruments, passing on his knowledge and encouraging them to pursue their own talents. The piano had become more than just an instrument. It was a bridge between his inner world and the world around him. Each performance, each practice session, strengthened not only his skill but also his character and sense of purpose. The principal occasionally checked in, offering support and encouragement. The relationship had transformed from one of mischief and misunderstanding to one of respect and mentorship. The boy had shown that courage and talent could create positive change, not just for himself, but for the entire school community. The experience had opened minds, inspired students, and reminded teachers and administrators alike of the importance of nurturing hidden potential. By the end of the school year, the boy had performed several times at assemblies and special events. His talent was recognized widely, but he remained humble and focused on the joy of music itself. The prank that had started the journey now seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the growth, confidence, and opportunities that had emerged from it. The boy had learned the power of courage, practice, and sharing one's gift, while the principal had learned the value of recognizing and encouraging the potential in every student. The story of the assembly spread beyond the school, inspiring others to look for hidden talents in unexpected places. The boy had become a symbol of quiet determination, showing that even a single moment of bravery could change the course of a life. And through it all, he continued to play, letting the piano tell the stories that words could not, and inspiring everyone who had the privilege of listening. After the performance at the assembly, life at school began to shift for the boy in ways he hadn't expected. Students who had barely noticed him before now looked at him with admiration and curiosity. Some approached him in the hallways, asking about his music, how he practiced, and whether he could teach them a few tricks. The boy felt proud, but he remained humble. He still loved playing piano for the joy it gave him, not just for attention. Yet, he began to realize that sharing his talent could inspire others, and that was a new and exciting feeling. Teachers and staff also took notice. They started to think about how many students might have hidden talents that went unrecognized. The principal, in particular, reflected often on what had happened. He realized that he had made a mistake by planning the prank, but he also saw how a single moment could reveal extraordinary potential. He wanted to make sure that the boy, and other students like him, had opportunities to explore and grow their talents. He began planning programs and events that could allow students to showcase skills in music, art, and other areas that were often overlooked. The boy continued to practice every day. He experimented with new pieces, refined older ones, and even began composing his own music more seriously. He found that each time he played, he felt stronger, more confident, and more connected to himself. Music was no longer just a private passion. It had become a way to express emotions and communicate with the world. The more he shared it, the more he realized that his gift had the power to move people, not just entertain them. With encouragement from teachers, he began to perform at smaller school events and gatherings. Each time, he grew more comfortable with the audience and the attention. Students who had once been shy to approach him now eagerly listened, clapped, and even asked questions. The boy found joy in seeing how music could bring people together, creating moments of shared emotion and understanding. He learned that his talent could make a difference, even in small ways. The principal and music teacher worked together to support the boy's growth. They provided him with opportunities to explore advanced techniques, access to better instruments, and time to practice during the school day. They encouraged him to participate in music competitions outside of school, and even suggested recording some of his compositions. The boy felt supported, but he also understood that the real value of his music was not in recognition or awards. It was in the expression, the connection, and the fulfillment it brought him. As word of his talent spread, the boy became a quiet role model for other students. They saw that even someone who had always been quiet and reserved could achieve something extraordinary through dedication and courage. He inspired others to pursue their own passions, whether it was music, art, sports, or academics. The school began to change subtly, with more students feeling encouraged to explore their talents and share them with peers and teachers. Despite the attention, the boy remained grounded. He understood that talent alone was not enough. Hard work, practice, and humility were equally important. He continued to focus on his music, sometimes alone in the music room, sometimes with a small group of friends who shared his interest. Each note he played was a step in his journey, a reflection of his growth and the lessons he had learned. The principal often checked in with the boy, offering advice and support without interfering. Their relationship had transformed from one of mischief and misunderstanding to one of mentorship and respect. The principal learned to value patience, encouragement, and the importance of seeing beyond initial impressions. The boy's courage in performing had taught the principal a lesson he would not forget, that every student had potential, and it was the adult's responsibility to nurture it. In addition to school performances, the boy began to think about ways he could use his music to make a positive impact. He suggested small concerts for younger students, helping them discover music and encouraging them to explore their own talents. He also volunteered to help organize events where students could showcase their abilities. Through these efforts, he realized that talent was not just for personal satisfaction. It could create community, bring joy, and inspire growth in others. As months passed, the boy's confidence grew steadily. He started composing more complex pieces, experimenting with rhythms and melodies he had never tried before. His performances became more expressive, reflecting his emotions and experiences. Each time he played, he felt more connected to the music and more certain of his path. He began to see music not just as a hobby, but as a part of who he was and what he could offer to the world. The principal continued to support the boy's development, using his story as an example for other staff and students. He emphasized the importance of recognizing potential, giving students opportunities, and being open-minded. The boy's journey became a symbol of what could happen when talent was nurtured rather than mocked. Teachers began looking more closely at their students, noticing skills and passions that had previously gone unnoticed. The school environment slowly shifted to one that encouraged exploration, creativity, and respect. The boy's friends and peers learned important lessons as well. They saw that success could come from quiet dedication, that talent might be hidden behind reserved personalities, and that encouragement and support could make a significant difference. They learned to be more observant, more kind, and more willing to celebrate the accomplishments of others. The boy's influence extended far beyond his music, shaping the school culture in positive ways. Over time, the boy began to see himself in a new light. He was no longer just the quiet student who loved to play piano alone. He was a musician, a mentor, and an example of courage and dedication. His journey had started with an unexpected challenge, but it had grown into something much bigger. He had discovered his own strength, the power of sharing his talent, and the joy of inspiring others. Through his music, he had changed not only his life but also the lives of those around him. The story of the prank and the boy's performance became part of the school's memory, retold as a lesson in humility, talent, and opportunity. It reminded students and teachers alike that every individual has hidden potential waiting to be discovered. The boy continued to play, practice, and compose, always seeking to express himself and connect with others. The applause, the admiration, and the recognition were meaningful, but the real satisfaction came from the music itself and the positive impact it created. By the end of the year, the boy had grown in skill, confidence, and character. He had turned an unexpected and potentially embarrassing moment into a transformative experience. The principal, teachers, students, and parents all recognized the boy's talent and dedication. More importantly, the boy had learned the value of courage, practice, and the joy of sharing his gifts. His journey showed that hidden talent, when nurtured and given a chance to shine, could change not only one life but the lives of many around it. The boy's story was a testament to perseverance, humility, and the power of music. It showed that even a single moment, when met with courage and authenticity, could have a ripple effect, inspiring and uplifting others. The prank that had begun it all became a distant memory, replaced by a legacy of growth, encouragement, and the beauty of discovering and sharing hidden talents. By the time the final part of the school year approached, the boy had become a well-known figure at Willow Creek Middle School. Not because he sought attention or wanted to be famous, but because his talent, dedication, and humility had naturally drawn people's admiration. Students who had once overlooked him now asked for advice, shared ideas, or simply wanted to watch him play. Teachers and the principal continued to offer guidance and encouragement, understanding that his music was not just a skill, but a bridge connecting him to the entire school community. The boy had grown tremendously since that first assembly where the principal had called him to play as a prank. Back then, he had been nervous, uncertain, and unsure if anyone would appreciate his gift. Now he played with confidence, emotion, and a sense of purpose. Each note he pressed told a story, and he felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that he was sharing something meaningful. Music had become a language for him, a way to express feelings that words could not capture, and it allowed him to communicate with people in ways he had never imagined. Teachers had noticed more than just his piano skills. His dedication, discipline, and focus began to influence other areas of his life. He became more confident in class, participated actively in discussions, and even helped organize small school events. The principal saw this transformation and felt a sense of pride. What had started as a prank had unexpectedly revealed a student's potential, and now that potential was blossoming into maturity, creativity, and leadership. Parents of other students also began to take note. They saw their children inspired by the boy's dedication, recognizing that talent could emerge quietly, and that encouragement and opportunity could make all the difference. Some parents asked how they could support their own children's hidden abilities, and the boy, without realizing it, became a quiet example of how nurturing curiosity and skill could impact a whole community. During lunch breaks and after school, the boy would sometimes play for small groups of students who wanted to listen or learn. He taught them basic techniques, shared tips on practice, and encouraged them to explore their creativity. He realized that music was not just a personal gift. It was a way to inspire and connect with others. Each interaction built his confidence further, showing him that talent combined with generosity could create a positive ripple effect. The principal took special care to create more opportunities for students to showcase their abilities. Inspired by the boy's journey, he organized a school talent showcase where students could present music, art, and other skills they were passionate about. The event became a highlight of the school year, celebrating creativity, dedication, and courage. The boy's story was shared as an example of what could happen when talent was recognized and nurtured, encouraging students to pursue their interests boldly. One afternoon, the boy was asked to perform for the school board during a special meeting. At first, he felt nervous about playing in front of adults who had authority and experience, but he reminded himself that music was his voice. As he played, he noticed that the members of the board were listening intently, some leaning forward in their chairs, others closing their eyes to absorb the melody. When the final note faded, there was a moment of silence, followed by heartfelt applause. The boy realized that his music could reach far beyond his schoolmates. It could touch people of all ages and backgrounds. The boy's confidence in performing continued to grow. He started entering local music competitions, where he discovered that he could hold his own against more experienced performers. Winning wasn't always the goal. Each performance taught him something new, strengthened his skills, and reinforced his love for music. He felt proud of his progress, but he remained humble, knowing that growth was an ongoing journey. As he became more involved in music, he also began composing larger pieces. These compositions reflected his experiences, emotions, and the lessons he had learned from the events at school. He wrote pieces about courage, perseverance, friendship, and self-expression. Each composition was unique, carrying a personal story that others could feel and relate to. His music began to have a voice of its own, independent of the applause or recognition it received. The principal often visited the music room to check on the boy's progress. Sometimes he would sit quietly in the corner, listening to the notes, reflecting on the journey from prank to discovery. He realized that this experience had changed him as well. He had learned humility, patience, and the value of nurturing potential rather than mocking it. The boy had transformed the principal's perspective on teaching, leadership, and mentorship, proving that true talent and character often reveal themselves under the right conditions. Over time, the boy also started helping younger students who were beginning to explore music. He encouraged them to practice regularly, to be patient with themselves, and to find joy in creating. He shared stories of his own journey, explaining how a challenging or unexpected moment could sometimes lead to growth and discovery. These interactions reinforced his understanding of the responsibility that came with talent, how sharing and guiding others could magnify its impact. The school community as a whole began to shift. Students felt more encouraged to pursue hobbies, express themselves creatively, and support each other's growth. Teachers became more attentive to discovering hidden talents, and the principal made it a priority to provide opportunities for all students to shine. The boys' journey had created a ripple effect, reminding everyone that growth, recognition, and courage often started quietly, with someone willing to step forward and share what they had to offer. As the year came to a close, the boy was asked to perform one last time for a school-wide end-of-year celebration. This performance was significant not because of the size of the audience, but because it marked the culmination of his journey so far. The auditorium was filled with students, teachers, parents, and staff. The boy walked to the piano with calm confidence, remembering the first assembly where he had been called up as a joke. That nervous, uncertain boy had grown into someone who played with skill, emotion, and courage. He began to play, the music filling the space with melodies that spoke of growth, courage, and hope. The audience listened silently, captivated by the beauty and depth of his performance. It was more than a recital. It was a story told through music, one that chronicled his journey from uncertainty to confidence, from hidden talent to inspiring presence. When the final note faded, the applause was thunderous. The boy smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that he had shared his gift fully and authentically. After the performance, the principal stood beside him and said, "You've shown us all what courage, dedication, and talent can achieve. Thank you for teaching us that every student has something special to offer." The boy nodded humbly, understanding that the journey was far from over, but proud of how far he had come. He had discovered not only his musical abilities, but also the impact of sharing, perseverance, and authenticity. The story of the boy and the piano became a legend within the school. It was retold to new students as a lesson in courage, the importance of nurturing talent, and the power of stepping forward even when faced with unexpected challenges. His journey reminded everyone that hidden gifts, when recognized and encouraged, could inspire change, create connections, and transform lives. The prank that had started it all became a distant memory, replaced by a lasting story of growth, courage, and the enduring power of music.